Hello, and a quiet welcome back to the Dusty Codex. Today's journey takes us not to ancient empires or forgotten battles, but to a chilling chapter in American history, nestled in the quiet, God-fearing villages of 18th and 19th century New England. It's a story born from fear, desperation, and a profound misunderstanding of disease. We are always curious to know where our stories are travelling to, and where your corner of the world is. Please, take a moment to let us know in the comments where you are watching from today. For decades, these rural communities were gripped by a terrifying panic, born from a mysterious disease that ravaged families. We now know it as tuberculosis, or consumption. But back then, they had a different, far more horrifying explanation. Locals came to believe that the first family member to die from consumption was returning from the grave as a vampire to feed on the living, sickening their loved ones from beyond the tomb. This wasn't a myth from distant Transylvania. It was a deeply held, terrifying belief in America. This belief led to a real, documented, and utterly desperate practice: the exhumation of bodies, grim rituals performed in the local cemeteries, and even the grotesque burning of the hearts of the deceased, all in a desperate attempt to sever the link between the living and the perceived undead. To understand the panic, we must first understand the enemy, consumption. In the 18th and 19th centuries, tuberculosis was a devastating, widespread killer, particularly in rural New England. It accounted for nearly 25% of all deaths during this period, claiming lives slowly and agonizingly. Victims would slowly waste away, losing weight, developing a persistent cough, and suffering from fever and night sweats. It was a lingering, cruel disease that seemed to drain the life force from individuals, one agonizing breath at a time. Doctors of the era had little understanding of its cause or cure. What was particularly terrifying about consumption was its pattern of infection. It would often sweep through entire families, claiming one member, then another, until entire households were decimated. In an age before germ theory, this looked less like a disease and more like a curse, or worse, something supernatural. When a family member died from consumption, and then others began to sicken, the terrified survivors would often conclude that the deceased was somehow draining the life from the living. They were not merely dead, they were actively preying upon their kin. They were vampires. Armed with this terrifying conclusion, the families, often with local officials present, would resort to desperate measures: exhumation. They would open the graves of their recently deceased loved ones, looking for signs that confirmed their worst fears. The first sign of a vampire was often an unnaturally fresh appearance. Bodies of consumption victims often decomposed slowly due to the nature of the disease, appearing relatively intact, sometimes even plump. This was taken as proof they were still living in the grave. Then there was the blood. As bodies decompose, internal organs liquefy, and fluids can seep out, sometimes pooling around the mouth or nose. To the terrified villagers, this was irrefutable proof. The vampire had been feeding, its mouth stained with the blood of its living relatives. Other perceived signs included fingernail growth, an optical illusion as skin recedes, or a change in position of the body. Each observation, easily explained by modern forensic science, became further evidence of the undead tormentor in the grave, driving the living to ever more extreme actions. Convinced they had identified the vampire, families would then perform desperate rituals to stop it. These varied from community to community, but they always involved desecrating the body in an attempt to sever its connection to the living. One common practice was to remove the heart of the deceased. If the heart was full of blood, it was further proof. The heart would then be taken to a nearby forge or a fire built directly in the graveyard and burned to ashes. The ashes would sometimes be mixed with water and given to the sick family members as a grisly cure. Other rituals included turning the body face down in the coffin, believing this would prevent it from feeding. Some would even sever the head or rearrange the bones to prevent the body from rising. Each action was born from terror, a desperate attempt to regain control over a disease they could not comprehend. In these isolated communities, where scientific understanding was nascent and death was a constant companion, the human mind reached for explanations, however terrifying. These weren't acts of malice, but acts of profound, desperate love and fear. The desire to save a loved one, to halt the unseen killer, drove them to unimaginable lengths. It is a chilling window into a past where folklore and medicine intertwined. If these stories, these raw glimpses into the human experience across time, are what you seek, I invite you to subscribe to the Dusty Codex. Your support allows us to continue uncovering these powerful and often forgotten chapters of history. The most famous and well-documented case of the New England vampire panic is that of Mercy Brown from Exeter, Rhode Island. Her tragic story encapsulates the entire phenomenon. The Brown family had been decimated by consumption. In the late 1800s, mother Mary Eliza, then eldest daughter Mary Olive, and then son Edwin, all fell ill. By 1892, only Edwin remained sick, and his father, George Brown, was at his wits' end. The family and the community began to suspect that the first family member to die, his daughter Mercy, was the cause. Mercy had died in January 1892, just 2 months before. On March 17th, 1892, George Brown, along with local doctors and a newspaper reporter, gathered in the Exeter cemetery. They exhumed the bodies of Mary Eliza, Mary Olive, and Mercy. While the mother and first daughter had largely decomposed, Mercy's body, despite being dead for 2 months in winter ground, appeared remarkably fresh, with blood in her heart and liver. To the terrified onlookers, this was irrefutable proof. Mercy Brown was a vampire. Her heart was removed and burned on a nearby pile of rocks. The ashes were mixed with water and given to Edwin to drink, in a last, desperate attempt to save him. The grim ritual was performed, but it was in vain. Edwin Brown died less than 2 months later, on May 2nd, 1892. The family's tragic saga was complete, a testament to the power of a disease and the desperation of a community. The New England vampire panic slowly faded as scientific understanding of tuberculosis advanced. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, germ theory became widely accepted, revealing that tiny bacteria, not undead family members, were the true culprits. Public health initiatives, better hygiene, and eventually medical treatments brought the scourge of consumption under control. But the chilling stories of exhumation and heart-burning left an indelible mark. They became the bedrock for much of the vampire lore that would captivate the imagination of the world. The tales of these terrified New Englanders, desperate to protect their families from an unseen enemy, echo in every classic vampire tale, a haunting reminder of a time when the monster was not in a castle, but in the graveyard next door,